Hello and welcome back to Russ's Movie Corner. My name is Russ, and as you can see, I'm sitting in front of my movie corner. I have a Star Wars t-shirt on, my Star Wars The Last Jedi movie right next to me, and judging by the frame around me, we are back, taking down a Star Wars themed video. This is What Culture Star Wars, and their video, 10 Major Plot Holes in the Star Wars Sequel Trilogy. If you've been on my channel for a long time, you know that I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I'm like one of the biggest nerds when it comes to Star Wars. I absolutely love it, okay? I actually really like the Star Wars sequel trilogy. I have all the books. I have all three movies. I watched all three movies. I have not seen all of the Star Wars shows on Disney Plus, I will admit. So, you know, I don't know as much about a lot of that stuff, like Kenobi, like Book of Boba Fett. I did watch kind of about the first, like, 5 episodes of The Mandalorian before I lost my Disney Plus subscription. It was okay. I kind of liked Pedro Pascal as the Mandalorian. I thought he was pretty good. I have not seen The Acolyte, so I can't comment on that. But what I wanted to talk about today, before we jump into these 10 major plot holes, A, we want to talk about what is a plot hole, and B, we want to talk about something called lore. So, let's first talk about a plot hole. Okay, so a couple of things that I would say classify themselves as a plot hole would be, in the first instance I can think of, would be in She-Hulk Attorney at Law. Okay, usually when you have any kind of superhero, and I'm going to use Captain Marvel as an example here, mostly because I think a lot of people misunderstand where this movie comes in, because they just think, oh, she's got these powers, she goes crazy at the end, oh, it's just a total Mary Sue. No. The Mary Sue was actually She-Hulk Attorney at Law. She was, she gets her powers, and then she's automatically faster, stronger, and better than Bruce, who's had his powers for more than a decade at this point. Okay? And it's like, now wait a minute. Okay, there's no explanation as to why she should be able to do that when she first has her powers. And this is one of the reasons why I'm using Captain Marvel. There's no reason as to, like, what's going on with her powers when her powers kind of go weird, and there's no explanation for anything. That's a plot hole, folks, okay? And the reason why I'm using Captain Marvel is because in Captain Marvel, okay, the whole entire time, okay, she'll try to use her powers at times, but she doesn't, like, really know how to let go. She's still fighting with restraint, and when she finally does, like, let her powers go when she's talking to the Supreme Intelligence, and then, you know, she finally says, I wonder what would happen. You know, it's like, I've been fighting with, like, you know, both hands tied behind my back. What happens when I, you know, let go of the chain? And she takes off the little, you know, thing that they use to connect to the Supreme Intelligence, and, you know, and then she kind of, like, lets go with her powers. But when she first starts fighting, she's bumbling, fumbling, you know, she's trying to control it because she's never had that power level before. And so it's like, if you watch that battle sequence when they're on the Kree ship, like, you know, she's like, Whing! And then, like, flies into the side, and then she, like, tries to shoot, and then, you know, she, like, blows something up, and she's like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Like, she has to learn how to kind of control her powers. And then, yes, within a short amount of time, she learns how to control her powers, and she does do a lot better. So much so that she scares off Ronan. Ronan's coming to, kill everything, and then all of a sudden, she comes up and she's like, boing, and then he's like, okay, not gonna mess with that. Let's get the heck out of here, guys. And then they take off, right? So that's what I like about this film, is that they give an explanation as for why she can go OP. They don't give an explanation, and they don't give time and effort for She-Hulk to start to learn how to use her powers. Like, one of the other things that I could say about that is, if you've ever watched The Amazing Spider-Man with Andrew Garfield, okay? When he first gets bit, and he starts going along, and he starts, like, trying to type, and he starts, like, because he walks up, and he hears the spider walking across the skateboard, and it's, like, loud, and, like, drum beats in his ears, and he's like, what the heck? And he walks in, and he's trying to do things, and he's, like, squeezing the tube of toothpaste, like what he thinks is normal, and it squirts it all over the the mirror, and, he's, like, very gingerly, like, pressing this thing off, and he, like, just tries to, like, turn the water just a tiny bit, and it like, or he, like, bashes the thing, and he, like, bashes the sink, and he, like, does all this stuff. They show that his power was out of control because he didn't know how to control it. Okay? Then he learns over the course of the movie to start to learn how to control the powers, okay, until he starts fighting some of the people. And then when he has to fight Dr. Connors, he realizes that he has to unleash and he has to go OP. And that's kind of the point of a superhero film, is when, even like Daredevil, when they first show him, he doesn't just walk up and just, it's like only a couple of goons is he able to beat up, but a lot of times he's getting his buns beat down, okay? And, like, there's the hallway fight in season 2 where he's like, he throws Frank into the elevator, and then turns on the elevator, and then starts beating down the biker gang. He's got the chain and, everything, and he's just, like, whipping those guys, and he's getting beat down as well as being beat, like, beating the guys down and stuff. And it's a brutal hallway fight, but it's not this, like, I'm just OP. I'm just gonna walk up here, just start beating criminals down, and not take a punch. That's not what it is. Okay? Now, the second one that I want to bring up very briefly. Okay, if you've ever watched, a lot of people were kind of mad at this film. Okay, this is Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. This is number 4. And a lot of people were kind of miffed because the book was long, okay? The book had a lot more to it. There was a lot more going on. Like, there was, it's like, there was a lot more, not strife, but there was a lot more kind of friction between Harry and Cedric. There was, Harry kind of, like, noticing Cho for the first few times, trying to ask her out, trying to, find out about things, trying to do things for the Yule Ball. There was a lot more in the book than there was in the movie. And I realized that when you're going to condense something that's, 1,000 pages plus down into a movie that is 157 minutes, okay, it's going to create problems, okay, because you have to condense a lot of what goes on in the film, or, in the book into the film version. I get that, okay? But my plot hole doesn't come from the film. My plot hole comes from the book, and anyone who's read the book will know what I'm talking about. Hermione creates something called the Society for the Protection of Elfish Welfare, and it comes about when they go to the Quidditch World Cup, because they're in the box with Cornelius Fudge and Bartemius Crouch Sr. and Lucius Malfoy and his family and all of that kind of stuff. And so, and while they're there, okay, Hermione witnesses a house elf named Winky, okay, who's like Dobby, okay, being seriously mistreated, and, you know, and she's like, oh my gosh, you know, people just treat house elves like they're less than human. And of course, you know, Ron's like, well, they're elves, they're house elves, they're, you know, they want to be subservient, they want to do what they want, you know, they want to do what their master wants. And so when she gets to Hogwarts, she creates this thing called SPEW, the Society for the Protection of Elfish Welfare, or SPEW, as the boys tease her with. And so they go along for a while. J.K. Rowling spends about 2.5 to 3 chapters on SPEW in the entirety of the book. Okay? And most of that is, like, there's one chapter that's titled SPEW, S-P-E-W, okay? And then she circles back to it a little bit into it, and then she circles back to it a little bit later in the book. But then once Harry gets through his second trial and is on to the third, and then he almost gets killed by Voldemort in the third challenge when he goes to the graveyard and stuff, she just drops it completely. She mentions it briefly in 5, but then drops it for the rest of the series. That is a plot hole, folks. Because it is something that never goes anywhere, never does anything. And so it was one of those things where when they were deciding what to cut, when Steve Kloves would go and visit, the screenwriter of the series would go and visit J.K. Rowling and say, what do we need to include? What can we cut? I'm pretty sure they had a long talk about the SPEW, and he probably said, we don't need that because people are going to get confused when it goes nowhere. Because people were confused when they read the book and it went nowhere. So the whole point of this is that a plot hole has to be something that either comes out of nowhere and is never explained, or B, has nothing to do with what's being explained on the screen. Now, let's briefly talk. I know I've been talking for about 13 minutes now about some stuff, but I briefly want to talk about lore, and then we're going to jump in and we're going to get onto this video because I have a lot to cover. One of the biggest things I'm a proponent of is lore. Now, one of the main things that I use in my arguments when I go after people in comments, in videos, all of that kind of stuff, what do I use? I use lore. Okay? This is the 2005 New Essential Chronology. This came out in 2005 or 2006. Yeah, 2005. Okay, and you can see here it says, updated for the Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, and the New Jedi Order. So as of 2006, this contained everything in the Legends EU universe. Now, after that, there was the Clone Wars TV series and the Clone Wars animated film. This film here, okay, was made, which this doesn't address. Okay, but I've seen it, so I understand it. There were a few novels that were made after that. Some of them kind of wrapped up the New Jedi Order and then went on to the Legacy series. And then there were some that were made post that up until about 2013, which was the Disney buyout. Okay? And basically from about 2014, actually 2015, okay, on, the new canon is grab out my Star Wars visual dictionary here, my episode 9. This is the new official timeline. Okay? The new official timeline, okay, starts at 66 before the Starkiller incident, which was episode 7. Okay, where Senator Palpatine of Naboo, secretly Sith Lord Darth Sidious, elected as Supreme Chancellor of the Galactic Republic, Anakin Skywalker begins Jedi training. So it's basically, it starts with episode 1. Okay? And from there, they kind of like, you know, tell you all of the things that have happened. Now, I, again, don't have all of the updated timeline information. Okay? Again, there's a lot more things. There's the High Republic that's been released since then. There's the Acolyte, the Mandalorian, you know, Resistance, the Rebels TV show, the Clone Wars TV show. They've added on a whole bunch of new media and books and various things that I don't have currently, okay? But when we're talking specifically about the sequel trilogy, okay, that visual dictionary and this new essential chronology from 2005 will serve us just as well for everything, because the bulk of the lore that came, that got put into the sequel trilogy came from this timeline. And I'll explain that as we go. Okay? So, let's jump in and let's talk about it.
With the final installment of the Skywalker saga now well in our rearview mirror, fans have had time to digest the Star Wars sequel trilogy and explore the positives and negatives. One thing that all three of these latest jaunts to a galaxy far, far away, at least in the Skywalker saga sense, have in common is that there are several undeniable plot holes strewn throughout them. And while some...
And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to mention that no, these are not plot holes. These are nitpicks. Okay? And so what we're going to do is when we get in and we start to kind of talk about some of these things, okay, as we continue on, okay, we're actually going to talk about some of this stuff. In fact, this is one of the plot holes that this guy got massively wrong. Because again, you just have to watch the film you got it from to understand that it's not a plot hole.
These plot holes may have been elaborated on and explained in recent comic books and novels. Not everybody who watches the sequel trilogy will be privy to said comics and books.
Okay, so, again, yes, but you're talking about casual fans and casual movie watchers. Most of those people that go and see those things, like my ex-wife was not a huge Star Wars nerd like I was, okay? In fact, she just enjoyed watching the films. She didn't care that, you know, like certain things happened or this happened or that happened. She didn't care. She was just kind of like, whatever, you know? So most non-fans, most casual movie watchers that just kind of watch a Star Wars film every once in a while, maybe indulge a fan of theirs that is like, hey, let's watch Star Wars, and they're like, sure, I haven't watched it in a long time, let's sit down and watch it. And they'll watch it, and they'll enjoy it, and then they'll move on, okay? Most of the time, when you're trying to bring up something that is a, quote, major plot hole, you're gearing it towards fans, not casual movie watchers. Okay? Because most casual movie watchers are going to look at a video like this and go, so what? I didn't notice any plot holes. Whatever. And they're going to move on to the next video. They're not going to watch a video like this because they don't care. A person like me who's a big Star Wars nerd, I'm going to sit there and go, okay, what did you think was a plot hole? That's not a plot hole. Here's how that works. Because again, lore. You can't ignore things that might be explained in books or movies, okay, or TV shows or comics or whatever, just because some mythical person out there that you're trying to gear this video towards that's probably never going to watch it doesn't care. Literally, they won't care. Okay? And that mythical person out there that you're trying to write this script for, okay, even if they took it and they looked at it and they went, maybe you're right, maybe there's a small plot hole here or there, that still doesn't explain how massively wrong you are when it comes to just basic movie watching. Because like I said, the scene with the lightsaber in episode 8 is going to completely blow any credibility this guy had out of the water. Okay?
With that in mind, then, I'm Sean Ferry for What Culture Star Wars, and here are 10 major plot holes in the Star Wars sequel trilogy. Number 10. The reconstruction of Luke's lightsaber.
And let's get right into it.
Skywalker, the last time we saw Luke Skywalker's trusty lightsaber was it being pulled to pieces by Rey and Kylo Ren in The Last Jedi.
Okay. Number one. Okay.
Particularly by episode 9 of the Skywalker saga. Last time we saw Luke Skywalker's trusty lightsaber was it being pulled to pieces by Rey.
Yeah, did you see that there? Did you catch it? It's split in two. Now listen to what this guy says.
Rey and Kylo Ren in The Last Jedi. But magically, by episode 9 of the Skywalker saga, Luke's weapon was in perfect working order. If you remember, The Last Jedi saw a forced tug-of-war of sorts that saw Luke's lightsaber pulled into a million tiny pieces.
A million tiny pieces?
Without even the mildest of explanations, this was all forgotten about by the time we see Rey with his...
What? Is that a million tiny pieces? No. Again, is that a million tiny pieces? No. All you had to do was watch the damn film, son. It's literally right there when she gets on the Millennium Falcon at the end of the film. She goes, how do we build a rebellion from this? And Leia goes, we have everything we need. That's not a million pieces, son. 2 pieces. 2. How in the hell can you call yourself a Star Wars fan and completely miss it by that much? Are you flippin' kidding me? In fact, I'm going to post these at the end of the video. Okay? I'm going to post them at the end of the video so that you understand how massively wrong this guy is. Okay? Because I literally, as I watched this video, I literally took down Star Wars The Last Jedi and I fast forwarded and basically like went in and I pulled it onto that last scene because I knew exactly what he was talking about and I knew exactly how to frickin' own his ass. And I went, here you go. And I took the pictures and I will post the pictures at the end of this part of this video. Okay? Because this is effing pathetic. You want to call yourself a news outlet. You want to call yourself a fan, quote unquote. You're not a fan, son. If you can't even watch the damn film and then go, oh, wait a minute, that's not a plot hole because if we slow the footage down, we actually see that the lightsaber only splits in 2, and literally Rey is holding the 2 pieces, including the intact kyber crystal, literally in her hand. Intact. It's like, dude, all you would need to do is get a piece of tubular metal, hollow tubular metal, okay, to replace the one part that got pulled apart. That's it. How effing stupid do you have to be to think that that's a plot hole? It wasn't a million pieces.
Exact weapon in The Rise of Skywalker. One could maybe attempt to make the argument that Rey repaired the lightsaber herself at some point between the events of The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker.
Which is evident in that sequence because it literally shows repair marks where, she fixed the damn thing. Are you stupid? Yes, the answer is yes.
But that argument can be immediately countered by...
No, it's literally... Dude, it's literally right here. You can see the repair marks. Where she freaking repaired it. She was a damn junk trader, you idiot. She was a scavenger. She literally had to fix and repair and make sure things operated before she walked up to Unkar Plutt. Again, do you have an inkling of how idiotic you sound? And I don't even need a book to say that because we literally see her pulling parts out of Star Destroyers and cleaning them up and, making sure they work and all that kind of stuff. She's literally been doing that her whole fucking life. How dumb do you have to be to not understand that Rey has technical knowledge? And it wouldn't be that hard to repair this part of the lightsaber because this is where it split right here. Okay? Because when they were force tugging on it, they were tugging on the kyber crystal. Okay? And it split at the weakest join, which was right here. How fucking dumb do you have to be? Literally. It's right there in the damn film. Watch the film.
How the closing moments of The Rise of Skywalker imply that Rey has yet to ever build, or in this case, reconstruct.
Well, but Leia built one, so couldn't Leia show Rey how to build one too? How to repair it? Because that's Leia's lightsaber. You idiot. Again, is Leia the daughter of Skywalker or not? Is Leia the daughter of Skywalker or not? I said you're going to force me to do it, aren't you? Yeah. This is the Endor foil. Okay. Rare. Daughter of Skywalker. Whose picture is on this card? Is that Leia? Is that Carrie Fisher? Huh? Do I have to keep doing this? You people are so stupid. Is Leia the daughter of Skywalker or not? Was she trained as a Jedi or not? Again, that was answered in this film you keep ignoring. You absolute freaking maroon. It literally shows her, okay, dueling with Luke, and she got to the point where she was just as good as he was. And then she gave up her lightsaber. And Rey took it with her to Exegol. Okay? And she hands Ben Anakin's original lightsaber, and she takes Leia's lightsaber, okay, to use in the confrontation with Palpatine. Duh! Are you fucking stupid? Because again, is she the daughter of Skywalker or not?
A lightsaber. So, just how did Luke's lightsaber get repaired? Who repaired it? How were they able to repair it? And
let me see here. Let's answer those questions. A, who repaired it? Well, probably a combination of Leia and Rey. Okay? How did it get repaired? Probably because it wasn't broken into a million pieces, like this guy's going to say again, because he's stupid. Okay? It was literally only broken in 2 pieces, and so they needed to make a small repair, okay, to the shaft, to the silver shaft. That's all it needed. Okay? According to the actual frickin' movie that you don't care about, okay? There's the Kyber crystal, and right there is the top half. And you can see where it broke. And you can see, this is the insane attention to detail. You can see, in this film, you ignore that there are actual repair marks on the shaft. So, honestly, they didn't need a whole lot. It's called common sense. Something that people like this have no clue what the hell is going on.
How is it flawlessly back in one perfectly working piece?
Because it was only in 2 non-working pieces. So it didn't take a whole lot to put it back into one flawless working piece. Oh my god! It's called common sense.
Number 9. The Millennium Falcon's fuel. Seeing the Millennium Falcon fire up and escape from Jakku in The Force Awakens is one of the most breathtaking set pieces in the most recent Star Wars trilogy. Still, there's one huge plot hole in amongst all of this. The audience is led to believe that the Falcon has been left to rot in the desert land of Jakku, with the old girl now merely a big old hunk of junk that's long since past its best days.
It was long past its best days in Episode 4. Like, didn't Leia literally, like, walk up to the window and go, "You came in that thing? You're better than I thought." Like, hello? Are you freaking stupid? Again, are you dumb? Okay? And so, here's the thing, okay? That is actually answered by the very movie, okay? She literally just says, that thing's good. He says, what about that one? Because she's like, we'll outrun them in that quad jumper. And he's like, what about that one? And she goes, that one's garbage. Okay? And then the quad jumper explodes. And then she stops. She skids to a halt before the camera. And she goes, the garbage will do. And then they turn around and they run back to the Millennium Falcon to that score of, you know, na 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 na, and then they run on, okay, and she fires it up because it's not rotting in the desert. Unkar Plutt was making modifications to it, like Han Solo did, like some of the other people did. He had made some modifications to things in the Millennium Falcon, okay? And Rey, it is learned in Before the Awakening and also the Episode 7 novelization, she had flown ships previously. She was a pilot. She knew how to fly ships. But she also had a simulator where she learned how to, like, turn ships on and, you know, and fly. And that's why she says, you know, I've piloted a few ships before, but I've never left the planet. Okay? So, and this guy makes it seem like, okay, fuel in Star Wars is like fuel here on Earth, where if you leave the fuel sit for too long of a time, it starts to go bad. Hyperfuel, my understanding of hyperfuel in the Star Wars universe, it never goes bad. Okay? So it could sit around for literally 1,000 years and not go bad, according to my reading of the lore of what hyperfuel is, okay? Now, I could be wrong. There may be some things where that is the case, but I would think that with as many ships out in the desert, with as many ships coming and going from Jakku because of traders and other things, because it's basically a galactic junkyard. If people need parts, they stop there, they get their parts from Unkar Plutt, they install them, they make trades, they do some different things, and then they take off. Okay? It's not a place that you go willingly, it's a place that you go when you need black market parts, or you need parts for ships that are not easy to come by. Okay? And that's the whole point. So no, that wouldn't be something where, it's like, oh, we've got this fuel problem. No. Okay? That shouldn't be a problem, because Unkar Plutt wasn't sitting on the Millennium Falcon just letting it rot. He was actively trying to fix it up. Okay? And again, that's in the novelization, and it's also in the movie. Because he literally runs up and yells at the sky, "Hey, that's mine!" Are you stupid? Yes, the answer is yes.
Which makes it all the more head-scratching that Rey, Finn, and BB-8 power up this most legendary of vessels and use it to outrun the nefarious First Order. If, as we've first been told, the Falcon has indeed spent years or even decades in the dusty and coarse landscape of Jakku, surely it would take just a little while longer to get her back up and running, even if it was possible to get her working whatsoever. Added to that, just how is their fuel still in the Millennium Falcon when we're reintroduced to the ship in The Force Awakens?
Well, because you're assuming, okay, here again, you're assuming that the ship has been sitting in the desert for decades. It hasn't been sitting in the desert for decades. Okay? In fact, if we take... Oh, that one's Rise of Skywalker. We want Force Awakens. Let me see here. Let me see here. How about that ship? It's closer. If nothing else, we can get out of sight. Rey scarcely glanced in the other vessel's direction. That one's garbage. We need something that'll move, not just get off the ground if we're lucky. They ducked simultaneously as the two TIE fighters roared past overhead, when instead of firing at the tiny figures, their gunners directed the bursts of energy at the fugitive's destination. The quad jumper came apart in a ball of flame, flinging bits and pieces of itself in all directions, as the detonation scorched the landing area. Throwing up their hands, Finn and Rey shielded their faces from the heat and flying debris. When they lowered them, nothing was left to be seen of the quad jumper but a smoking pile of rubble. Rey's reaction was immediate and realistic. Okay, the garbage it is. Changing direction, they raced for the other craft. Though it was partially covered by several protective tarps, the loading ramp was down. Finn paused only briefly to glance at the ident plate sealed flush inside the airlock wall. "My con," he read aloud. "What the hell does that mean?" Ahead of him, Ray yelled without looking back. "Some con man's private craft, probably. This might be a good thing. It might be built to travel faster than a crippled skimmer." "If we're lucky," Finn muttered, echoing her early observation as he and BB-8 followed. Ray hit a wall panel even before her companions were safely aboard. To her great relief, it responded. The ramp behind them rose and the lock sealed. The vessel's layout was straightforward, and they found the cockpit immediately, tossing her staff to one side and throwing herself into the pilot's seat even as she was scrutinizing the instrumentation. Ray activated several controls. Much to her surprise, the console in front of her immediately came to life. She tapped the visualization. "Gunner's position is down below." Turning, Finn headed for the indicated area. "You ever fly this thing or anything like it?" As BB-8 looked on, she shouted back at him. "I piloted all kind of craft, but nobody's flown this old crate in years." "Then what makes you think it'll get off the ground?" Her reply was grim. "If you prefer, we can leave and try running across the open tarmac while being shot at." Having no comeback for that, Finn slipped down and buckled himself into the gunner's seat. To his shock, it responded to his weight by whipping to the left. Hastily, he grabbed a hold of the controls. Whoa, easy. Manipulating the intuitive controls allowed him to quickly take full control of the turret's movements. I can do this. And if anything, he saw quickly, the track and fire controls were simpler and more primitive than those he handled in the Special Forces TIE Fighter. Ray rapidly ran through the standard pre-lift sequence, activated the full panoply of relevant instrumentation, and sat back. A low whine rose from the rear of the craft. She reached for the control that would, she hoped, bring all her hurried preparations to fruition. One of three things would occur when she thumbed it on. She knew. They would lift off, the ship would blow up, or nothing at all would happen. Not good odds, but the only ones they had. She took a deep breath and punched the control. I can do this. I can do this. At the stern of the old ship, the long, quiescent engines flared to brilliant life. Fully powered up now, it soared into the bright blue sky of Jakku, but not efficiently. Shedding tarps as it rose, it spun and careened wildly, nearly crashing back to the ground. Wrestling with the unfamiliar controls, Ray managed to level off just in time to crash into and through the town's entry archway. Nîmes Outpost's sole example of architectural pride. Below, the puffy-faced figure of Unkar Plutt emerged from a collapsed structure to scream at the sky, "Hey, that's mine!" Finding the oddly named craft surprisingly responsive to manual control, an increasingly optimistic Ray spun it around and accelerated, blasting away from the port. The pair of TIE fighters she had been shooting up at the town immediately gave chase. Okay, so now, if we go a little bit further, alright. Feeling confident that she could now entrust temporary control of the ship to its autopilot without fear of being tracked, she slipped out of her harness and hurried out of the cockpit. In doing so, she passed BB-8, who, after the acrobatic aerial contortions of the past few minutes, was only now able to steady himself. "You okay?" she inquired in passing. Several short, curt beeps allowed that he was, and while also communicating the experience they had just gone through had been less than pleasurable. She found Finn in the lounge, trying to regulate his breathing while coming down from an adrenaline high. Turning to her as she slowed, he gave her a wide, disarming grin. "That was some piloting. Thanks," she shrugged. "I've been flying every kind of junk you can imagine almost since I could walk." It was her turn to smile. "Speaking of which, that was some shooting. I was worried you wouldn't have time to react." "You could have told me what you had in mind. Might have saved me a heart palpitation or two." She shook her head. "No time. I had to pull the turn almost as soon as I thought of it. I just had to rely on your ability to react to the maneuver." He nodded. "Good thing my hands were frozen to the track and fire controls. When all of a sudden he showed up in my sights, all I had to do was twitch my fingers." "You got him on the first blast." His smile gave way to a touch of self-satisfaction. "It was a pretty good shot, wasn't it?" "It was perfect," Ray told him. She was silent in the lounge for a long moment before he murmured, "Why are we staring at each other? I don't know." So that was that. And then when, let me see here. Okay. Let me see here. "Chewie, we're home," Finn heard a man say. Then the covering in the deck above them was ripped away. Hands raised in surrender, hoping the least they could expect was not to be shot out of hand, they found themselves gazing up at, not a stormtrooper. The man holding the blaster on them was not wearing a helmet, not even a protective visor. There was nothing to interfere with his angry expression. It filled a face scarred with know-how, aged by experience and world-weary, characteristic of someone who had set foot on dozens of worlds. His eyes were hazel, his gray hair tousled, and he wore the look of a man who had seen too much too soon and been forced to deal with idiots all too often. His evident age notwithstanding, the hand holding the blaster neither shook nor wavered. Okay. Let me see here. Then it says, it's like, as he emerged from the service corridor, Finn found himself looking up at the man's companion and up and up. Impatiently, their captor gestured ever so slightly with the muzzle of his blaster. "Where'd you find this ship?" "Right here." She saw no reason not to tell the truth. "I mean, down on the surface. Nîmes Outpost, to be specific." Dropping his lower jaw to signify his disbelief, he stared back at her. "Jakku? That junkyard?" "Thank you," Finn said. "Junkyard." His original opinion confirmed, he shot at Ray a look with that "I told you so." "Who had it?" he continued. "Duquesne?" Again, she thought no reason to prevaricate. "I stole it from a salvage dealer named Unkar Plutt." Brows narrowed as the weathered visage wrinkled even more. "From who?" Look, taking a chance, Ray lowered her hands so she could spread her arms wide. I don't know all the details for sure. I'm not privy to Plutt's private accounting, but all talk says that Plutt stole the ship from the Irving boys, who stole it from Duquesne, who stole it from me. In addition to anger, their captive's voice was filled with righteous indignation. To Ray, it sounded a little forced. Definitely, this man was not now, and never had been a stormtrooper or anything like it. What he had been, maybe, was someone not unlike herself, a bit of a businessman, a bit of a con man, a bit of an adventurer. And she says, and then we go down towards the end of the page. Well, you tell him that when you see him again, you told him that Han Solo just stole back the Millennium Falcon for good. Whirling, he holstered his blaster and headed for the cockpit, his lofty associate at his side. So there you go. Okay? The thing is that she didn't know that Unkar Plutt had been keeping up maintenance on it. All she knew was that every time she came into Nema Outpost, it was just sitting there. So she didn't know if it had been fired up or anything like that, because she specifically says, I was not privy to his, private accounting and dealings. So she didn't know that he was trying to fix up the Millennium Falcon. Okay? Again, lore.
Even if the Falcon happened to be dumped with a full tank of fuel, that fuel would have dried up and evaporated way before Ray.
That's assuming that you're talking about a solid fuel propellant. That's not what Star Wars uses for ships, buddy boy. Oh my god. You fucking stupid. Oh my god. Oh, save me from the stupidity! Please save me from the stupidity! Do. Let me see here. Does this have the... I got this hand. Let me see here. Email post 36. A harsh desert planet is the last place one would expect to find an alien of aquatic origins, but Unkar Plutt goes where profit, not nature, dictates. Removed from his saltwater surroundings, Unkar's Krolute body sags unsettlingly on his frame, giving him the appearance of a melted blobfish. This only adds to the unappealing demeanor as the junk boss of Jakku, who runs a successful business stealing, scavenging, and selling scrap. He doles out slim rations of food in exchange for valuable salvage, and calls upon goons and henchmen to ensure he gets the best deals. So, those are veg meat and polystarch. Okay. Unkar's trading stall stands at the center of the few semi-permanent structures within Nema Outpost. An awning-roofed blockhouse the locals call the concession stand. Unkar has a monopoly on food supplies and is the principal source of nourishment for scavengers who work the junk fields. In exchange for valuable salvage that he can sell for real credits, Unkar doles out survival rations. He sells the salvage to spacers on Jakku, or nearby worlds like Ponema Terminal and Ogum. Okay. Let me see here. Does it show... As easily as the Millennium Falcon fell into Solo's life after a heated game of sabacc, so it was destined to abandon him after a changing fate. Solo made do with other ships at his disposal, eventually setting on an enormous bulk freighter named Eravana, which he uses to haul massive shipments of legally questionable cargo. The ship is largely automated, meaning Solo and Chewbacca can handle most of the work, but on particularly dangerous or profitable hauls he hires additional hands. And then it shows off the Millennium Falcon down here. But the Millennium Falcon does not run on solid propellant. It runs on hyperfuel. Okay? That was something that they don't really mention that much, is that they don't have solid rocket propellant. Okay? It's not how it works. Okay? It may sound like a rocket booster, but it's not. It's as much a rocket booster as an impulse engine. Okay? They have sublight engines, and then they have light speed engines, okay? And they both use the same fuel, okay? It's called hyperfuel. We saw it in the movie Solo.
Finn and BB-8 stumbled across this bird that once did the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs. Number 8. Those Force voices. One of the most impressive, fan-pleasing moments of The Rise of Skywalker saw Rey visited by the voices of a whole host of fallen Jedi as she's being pummeled by Emperor Palpatine. From what we know, said fallen Jedi include Yoda, Luke Skywalker, Mace Windu, Qui-Gon Jinn, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Anakin Skywalker, Ahsoka Tano, Kanan Jarrus, Adi Gallia, Luminara Undul, and Aayla Secura. The element of all of this that doesn't make sense, however, is tied to Qui-Gon. Back in The Phantom Menace, Liam Neeson's Qui-Gon explained how he was the first Jedi in centuries who would be able to communicate through the Force following his death.
How? That was never mentioned in Episode 1. And that was never actually, like, told at any point. So, what I'm gonna do... Novelization for Revenge of the Sith. Now, Liam Neeson, for this film, actually did come back and film a small cameo role as Qui-Gon Jinn. Because, originally, to kind of explain what was going to happen in kind of towards the end of it, he was trying to make it seem like there was a connection to how was it that Obi-Wan was able to transition into a Force ghost. Not to mention the fact that we see Yoda as a Force ghost, we see Anakin Skywalker as a Force ghost in Episode 6, like, almost immediately after he died. Okay? And we see Yoda within a couple days of dying, being a Force ghost. So, it's absolutely idiotic, okay, to think that. Now, this is the scene in question, okay? This is Chapter 21 of Revenge of the Sith, the novelization. Now, the actual novelization is not as good as the actual film. I'll just say that right now, because the shooting script that they were using to make this was a shooting script that didn't have a whole lot of spec to it. Okay, so there was a lot of scenes that were cut at the end. There was a lot of things that were cut in the meantime. There were a lot of things that happened because there was things that were going on behind the scenes that forced George to cut certain scenes. And he also realized that, like, what's insane is that like, basically, this is the insanity of it. That's the opening. Yeah, on the ship with Grievous. That's the opening. I mean, we're talking 136 pages, okay, of just the opening. And it's like, what the hell? So yeah, it's like a full third of the frickin' thing was on the ship. And it was like, what the hell, dude? Why? I remember just like reading through it and reading through it and reading through it, and I'm like, can they just get off the stinking ship already? So a lot of that was trimmed down, and in some cases not even filmed. Okay? When you watch the deleted scenes, you'll see that some of the scenes were very short, some of the scenes were longer, some of the scenes weren't finished, and they outright, like if you read the novel, there's outright scenes that they didn't even film. Because George probably looked at it and went, yeah, this is going to take too long to do, so let's just not worry about that. Because George realized that the big action set piece needed to be at the end of the film, not the beginning of the film. And it needed to be that Titanic showdown that they'd been hinting at since Episode 4. Okay? When Obi-Wan walks up and when Vader and Obi-Wan get together and they're like, you know, when I left you, I was but the learner. Now I am the master. You know, only a master of evil, Darth. And then they start fighting. Ever since that conversation between Obi-Wan and Vader, people had been looking forward to the titanic confrontation between Obi-Wan and Anakin on Mustafar, okay? And we didn't know that it was Mustafar at that time, okay? Until we got in there, and then we suddenly realized that it was this lava planet called Mustafar, and then you're going, now I understand why Vader looks all burned and nasty and crispy, and okay, now it's making a little bit more sense why he was in the suit. Thank you, George. That's why I call this the perfect bridge film, okay? Because it perfectly takes what came before in episode 1 and episode 2, ties up some of those elements, and then perfectly transitions everything into where we're going to be in episode 4, 5, and 6. Now, at the end of the film, after the confrontation between Obi-Wan and Anakin, as Obi-Wan is coming, the Bail Organa comes up the stairs. There's this asteroid field. It's called Polis Massa. And there's an asteroid field there. And Bail Organa runs up and he says, hey, Obi-Wan just made contact. He's got Padme with her, but she's dying or something like that. And so then you see him and it looks like he's meditating. Okay? This is what's happening. Even after nearly 900 years, the road to self-knowledge was rugged enough to leave him bruised and bleeding. He spoke softly, but not to himself. Though no one was with him, he was not alone. My failure this was. Failed a Jedi I did. He spoke to the Force, and the Force answered him. Do not blame yourself, my old friend. As it sometimes had in these past 13 years, when the Force spoke to him, it spoke in the voice of Qui-Gon Jinn. Too old I was, Yoda said, too rigid, too arrogant to see that the old way is not the only way. These Jedi I trained to become the Jedi who had trained me long centuries ago, but those ancient Jedi of a different time they were. Changed has the galaxy. Changed the Order did not. Because let it change, I did not. More easily said than done, my friend. An infinite mystery is the Force. Yoda lifted his head and turned his gaze into the Wheel of Stars. Much to learn there still is, and you will have time to learn it. Infinite knowledge, Yoda shook his head. Infinite time does that require? With my help, you can learn to join with the Force, yet retain consciousness. You can join your light to it forever, perhaps in time, even your physical self. Yoda did not move. Eternal life. The ultimate goal of the Sith, yet they can never achieve it. It comes only by the release of self, not the exaltation of self. It comes through compassion, not greed. Love is the answer to the darkness. Become one with the Force, yet influence still to have, Yoda mused. A power greater than all it is. It cannot be granted, it can only be taught. It is yours to learn if you wish it. Slowly Yoda nodded. A very great Jedi Master you have become, Qui-Gon Jinn. A very great Jedi Master you always were, but too blind I was to see it. He rose and folded his hands before him and inclined his head in the bow of respect. The bow of the student in the presence of the Master. Your apprentice? I gratefully become. He was well into his first lesson when the hatch opened behind him. He turned. In the corridor beyond stood Bail Organa. He looked stricken. Obi-Wan is asking for you at the surgical theater, he said. It's Padme. She's dying. So, and we also heard in episode 2, okay, when Anakin is slaughtering the Tuskens, we hear Qui-Gon say, Anakin, no. Showing that he was already on the verge of clawing his way back. Okay? So, this statement that he makes is absolutely asinine. Okay? Because nowhere in anything does it say that he was the first Jedi in centuries, or whatever, to come back from the Force. It doesn't matter. Plus the fact that after Padme dies, okay, if we look Um, when Obi-Wan moved to follow, Yoda's gimmer stick barred his way. A moment, Master Kenobi. In your solitude on Tatooine, training I have for you, I and my new master. Obi-Wan blinked. Your new master? Yes, Yoda smiled upon him, and your old one. Meaning Qui-Gon. Okay. Now they expanded upon that in the movie, to have basically him say, uh, a friend has learned the way back from the depths of the Force, your old master, and he goes, Qui-Gon, and he goes, teach you how to commune with him, I will. Which is what we'll get to here in a second.
This means that Qui-Gon gets a pass on being able to speak to Rey, but the rest of those Jedi? Not so much. Jin was killed off before he was able to pass his knowledge on to any of his fellow Jedi Knights.
As we just learned, nope! Because it's likely that Qui-Gon Jinn could influence some of the other Jedi who have passed on, that their spirits were one with the Force, and ergo they can actually bring their stuff in. Because as we see in Episode 9, as we see actually in Episode 6, okay, we see it in Episode 4, Obi-Wan's voice. In Episode 5, he appears to Luke a couple of times as a Force ghost. And in Episode 6, he appears to Luke twice, one on Dagobah and two on Endor at the end of the film. We also see Anakin appear at the end of the film, and we also see Yoda appear at the end of the film. And this passage actually explains how Yoda was able to do it, okay? And it's likely that when Anakin died, it's likely that Obi-Wan greeted him in the Force and brought his Force ghost to say hi to his son. And it's likely that Yoda, before Luke cut himself off from the Force, it's likely that Yoda taught Luke how to do it, because he appears as a Force ghost in this film before that scene. You absolute freaking maroon. Are you stupid? Yes, the answer is yes. Because, honestly, you'd have to be a complete nincompoop not to see that. Okay? And the thing is, I have the scene here in the book. Okay? It says, through the calm came a voice. These are your final steps, Rey. Rise and take them. Then joined others. Rey, Rey, Rey. She didn't recognize them all, but somehow she knew them to be the moment they made themselves known to her. They'd been with her all along, she just needed to learn how to hear them, like Leia had promised. More voices came to her fast but gentle, as though she lay at the confluence of the Force, possibilities, futures and pasts, all stretching away from her, or maybe leading toward her. The cosmos, time, energy, being. Nothing was the way she'd thought it was. Bring back the balance, Rey. In the night, find the light, Rey. Presences filled her awareness, some recent, some ancient, some still anchored to the living in a strange way. Rey didn't understand, but she accepted. They're talking about Ahsoka Tano, by the way. Alone? Never have you been. Every Jedi who ever lived lives in you. The Force surrounds you. Let it guide you as it guided us. Palpatine had wanted Rey for himself, but she chose to be their conduit, their vessel. She was a Jedi. Rey moved an arm, then a shoulder. She let the voices surround her, fill her, strengthen her. She turned over, placed a palm to the ground, pushed up. We stand behind you. Rise in the Force. She got a knee beneath her, leveraged herself up onto her toes. Rey paused, crouched, gasping for air. Her muscles didn't want to obey. Every moment turned her very bones to knives of pain. In the heart of a Jedi lies her strength. Voices were becoming louder, even more powerful. Rise. Rise. Luke's voice became deep and insistent, rising above all the others, a well of power from which to draw. Rey, the Force will be with you always. She rose, summoned Luke's lightsaber, which skidded across the stone and smacked into her hand. The blade ignited, and Rey stood, full of strength freely given to her by those who had come before. So there you go. Some ancient, some not. Some still connected to the living. Because Ahsoka Tano was still living at that point. We know that because the Ahsoka show places Ahsoka Tano at the time of the Resistance. She was not doing much to help the Resistance. She was kind of like old Obi-Wan, where she was kind of, living off on her own. Okay? But that was the whole point of it, was they said, yeah, Ahsoka's not dead. And people were like, well then, how did she... Yeah, because she's connected to the Force, idiot! Duh! Every Jedi that has come before is a part of the Force when they die. That's the whole point. Are you stupid? Yes, the answer is yes. Okay? Even in games like Jedi Outcast, okay? Jedi Academy, not Jedi Outcast, but Jedi Academy, where you're literally on Korriban, okay, fighting a 5,000-year-old Sith Force ghost by yourself as an apprentice. What are you talking about? The hell are you talking about, dude? You have no effing clue what is going on, do you? And this is easily solved, by the way, by just looking up the scenes on Wikipedia. Because literally all of the information is there.
Which would seem to suggest that it would be impossible for any Jedi other than Qui-Gon to be able to speak from beyond the grave. You could possibly say that somebody as wise as Yoda could likely teach themselves this particular trick, but it still feels questionable to have had so many Jedi have this ability that such a big deal was made out of Qui-Gon Jinn being the first Jedi for generations to be able...
Again, where are you getting that from? That was not what was said in any novelization or anything like that. Because, it doesn't make any damn sense. Let me see here. Let me go to... Let me see here. Queen Amidala scaled the palace walls and forced the surrender of Viceroy Newt Gunray, while Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan battled Darth Maul above the bottomless abyss of the Thee power generator. During the fighting, impenetrable electron walls closed to separate Obi-Wan from his master. Obi-Wan watched in helpless shock as Maul stabbed Qui-Gon through the chest with his double-edged lightsaber. As soon as the electron walls dropped, Obi-Wan attacked in a haze of grief and sliced Darth Maul in half. Later, in the palace turret room, Yoda promoted Obi-Wan to the rank of Jedi Knight. He also passed along the Council's recommendation that Anakin be trained as Obi-Wan's new apprentice. The Jedi Order realized that Darth Maul had been a Sith, and Yoda began the search for the second Sith, the one who would have trained Maul and possibly even orchestrated the Naboo invasion. The reemergence of the Sith also seemed to confirm Yoda's interpretation of the prophecy of the Chosen One. In the final celebration of them on the palace steps, Queen Amidala and Boss Nass presided over the long-overdue unification of their two civilizations. Behind them, Palpatine, the newly elected Supreme Chancellor of the Republic following Valorum's forced ouster, looked on with satisfaction. Alright. Then there was a huge gap to the Clone Wars. Let me see here. Anakin had been recently disturbed by vague and disturbing nightmares of his mother's torture. He left Naboo with Padme and traveled to Tatooine, where he learned that Shmi Skywalker had been freed from slavery years ago to become the life of local moisture farmer Klieg Lars. At the Lars homestead, Anakin met Klieg's son Owen Lars and Owen's girlfriend Beru, and enjoyed a reunion with C-3PO, Anakin's home-built protocol droid, but Shmi was not there. She had been kidnapped by a tribe of Tusken Raiders weeks before. Anakin tracked down his mother, who had been tortured and was near death, in a Tusken camp. When she died in his arms, Anakin welcomed the liberating fury of the dark side. He slaughtered the entire Tusken clan, including the children. Okay, they don't mention that Anakin, or that Qui-Gon said that. Now let me see here. Yeah, the Clone Wars section is gigantic in this one because there was a lot of media that was made in between. Okay. Let me see here. Palpatine, however, didn't know the whole truth. At the secret location, the Police Master asteroid belt, Padme had given birth to twins before her death. Girl Leia would be raised by Bail Organa, his wife on Alderaan. The boy Luke would be placed in Anakin's stepbrother's Owen's Lois Moisture Farm at Tatooine, where Obi-Wan would watch over the child's development as the Herbert Ben Kenobi. The overly talkative droid C-3PO received a memory wipe, and he and R2 received new assignments. Yoda planned to go into hiding on the swamp planet of Dagobah. When Anakin's children reached the appropriate age, Yoda believed that the Force would bring one or both of them to him. In that time, he would craft them into weapons that he would use that would spear the heart of Palpatine's Dark Empire. So yeah, it was. So this one just goes off of the actual movie, not off of the novelization. Okay. Because where the movies and the novelizations conflict, the official timelines always use the movies as prime because they're the ones that most people know. And then the novelizations are placed as secondary. Okay? Because that was one of the things where, like, a lot of people were like, well, if you read the novelization of Return of the Jedi, Luke is building his lightsaber at the very beginning of the novel, and then he puts it into R2-D2. Okay? In Shadows of the Empire, he builds it in between the events, okay, to have a brand new lightsaber. Okay? And he and Vader never met during that whole entire novelization. Okay, so Vader didn't know that Luke... He knew that Luke had grown in power, but he didn't know that Luke had completed his training in terms of being able to complete a lightsaber and basically becoming a Jedi Knight at that point. The only trial that he needed to face at that point was the confrontation with Vader, his second confrontation with Vader. And so that became the impetus for when novelizations of movies and novelizations made later on conflicted. The novelizations made later on, unless they were by the actual thing, because like there was here again a scene filmed where Luke was building his lightsaber at the beginning of Return of the Jedi, but he realized that he would have to insert that scene at some point, and it made it a lot better just to have the droids going off rather than seeing Luke build and complete a lightsaber. It was a much better revelation to see him on the sail barge go ching, and then, you know, like he catches it and then he turns it on and he's like, woohoo, yeah, I got a lightsaber now, bitches, what you want? And so it became a much cooler scene because you didn't know that he had built it. In your mind, at the time when it was released in 1983, most people probably assumed that he had built a lightsaber. But when he walked in unarmed into Jabba's palace, people were probably like, what the hell is he doing? And then he kills the Rancor without any trouble. And then he basically, like, goes out there and then, yeah, the thing goes... and then he goes... Shunk. All right, let's do this. You know, it's like he turns on the lightsaber. He's like, let's do this. And it's like, it's an awesome moment. And so it sets up the plot a little bit better, because then it's a more, like, heroic moment at that point, because you don't know that he's built a lightsaber until R2-D2 shoots it out to him from the top of the sail barge. And that is, like, one of the best parts of Return of the Jedi, is when he, you know, is when that lightsaber goes flying. You know, he jumps down, and then he jumps back up, flips over the guy, catches the lightsaber, and then just starts knocking guys silly. I mean, it was just like, that was one of the most heroic moments of that film. And it has a much more of a punch, because you don't know that Luke hasn't built a lightsaber yet. If that makes sense. And so when Steve Perry sat down to do the Shadows of the Empire, one of the questions that he asked was, when did you want to see Luke Skywalker building his lightsaber? And a lot of the fans said yes, we'd like to see that. And so he literally builds the lightsaber, and he uses that to train with a little bit, and then he has to use it to defend himself against the Swoop Gang in the Tatooine desert. If you've read the novel, you'll know what I'm talking about. And so here again, this is something that is, if you understand lore is important. Okay? Lore is everything. When it comes to things like Star Wars, Dune, Harry Potter, it doesn't matter. Lore is key. It's the why are things here. Okay? So let's finish out with this, and then we'll call it an episode for today.
To pull this trick off. Now, it must be said that his cameo in the Obi-Wan series goes a little bit toward explaining this, but even that took place after the deaths of many of these Jedi Knights.
And so here's the idiocy on display. Okay? That's coming after Yoda. Here again, tell me you've never seen a Star Wars film without telling me you've never seen a Star Wars film. This is coming hot on the heels of Yoda, because Kenobi takes place in between 3 and 4, okay? And literally, there's the scene at the very end where Yoda tells Obi-Wan, I will teach you how to commune with your former master. So it follows that, here again, the people making Disney Star Wars understand the lore, because they take the stuff, like they look at the movies, they watch the movies, and they go, he's supposed to be communing with Qui-Gon. So they call up Liam Neeson and they say, hey, we've gotten Ewan McGregor to come back for this Kenobi show. Would you like to make a cameo as Qui-Gon Jinn? And he was probably like, hell yes. I didn't get to make my cameo in Revenge of the Sith, so hell yes, I would love to. Let's do this. So they dressed him up. They got him his wig. They got him his Jedi robes, and he gets to stand there and scold Obi-Wan a little bit. What's your fucking problem? Because again, in episode 4, okay, we hear Obi-Wan's voice talking to Luke Skywalker. In episode 5, we see him on 2 separate occasions as the Force Ghost. Okay? And in episode 6, we see him twice as a Force Ghost. Once on Dagobah, and once on and once on Endor at the end of the film. Okay? So it follows that Yoda, okay, taught Obi-Wan some exercises to commune with Qui-Gon Jinn. Qui-Gon Jinn taught him, here's what you're going to do, and then Yoda also learned from Qui-Gon Jinn, because the Force is everywhere. The Force is omnipresent in the Star Wars universe. Okay? Qui-Gon was teaching both Obi-Wan and Yoda at the same time. And we also see Yoda as a Force ghost in this film. In episode 8. We see him as a Force ghost. Even smacking Luke on the forehead with his gimmer stick, like, hey, you moron. Okay? Are you fucking dumb? I'm thinking you are. Okay? I hate to have to say it that way. But this is what makes me angry about these supposed fans. They have no knowledge of the lore at large. And so, yeah, they'll make up wild-ass claims like, oh, Qui-Gon was the first guy in centuries to become a Force ghost. Whoa! Huh? Like, obviously, you've never actually read Tales of the Jedi. Okay? Obviously, you've never read any of the, or you've never played any of the Jedi Knight games because, like, Rom, the Jedi that got killed by Jarek in the opening cinematic of that, appears as a Force ghost to Kyle Katarn, okay? And tells him, like, there's this guy named Jarek, and he's a bad dude, and, you're going to have to take him down, and guess what? It's going to lead you down the path of the Jedi. Duh. That's the reason why it was called Jedi Knight. And, like, it literally shows, like, Jarek gaining strength from the Force, just like Rey does in Episode 9. Where do you think they got it from, ya pucking morons? I mean, seriously, this is so idiotic on so many levels that it boggles the mind how this was ever released. That somebody at What Culture didn't do some basic research to see if this was true. Like, oh, I don't know, watch the film and see if this was an actual thing that happened, or is there something different that happened? Is the lightsaber truly broken forever, or was it actually repaired? Because that was one of the things that was actually addressed, okay, in the thing that we do. Let me see here. Alright, let me see here. The Skywalker lightsaber. So let's do this. Originally, Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber, built at the onset of the Clone Wars, this weapon was long thought lost on Cloud City. It was salvaged from the mining colony's industrial depths and eventually found its way into Maz Kanata's possession. After it was used to kill Snoke, the lightsaber was split in two. Right there. This is an official document, folks. Was split in two in a forced tug-of-war between Kylo Ren and Rey. And you can literally see, I know it's going to be hard to see, but you can literally see the weld marks where she welded it back together again. Okay? And so, like, literally, again, how effing dumb do you have to be to not notice that and go, oh, wait a minute. Because again, all you had to do was watch the film to know that it wasn't broken into, quote, a million pieces. And two, to know that when you watch The Last Jedi and you see up close, you can even pause and see up close where it literally shows that the lightsaber was repaired. What more do you want? And I mean, these are just like two of the points so far. And I've already owned him on both points. Okay? I mean, there's like two or three of the points so far. And I can't believe that I've been able to just own him this flippin' hard. It shouldn't be. I should not have... I mean, honestly, if you'd done your research, these wouldn't be plot holes. These would be more nitpicky things, okay? And so I knew when I was sitting there and I was thinking about doing this video, I thought I need to do the Revenge of the Sith novelization because I know, having read the novelization, that it does contain that scene with Qui-Gon and Yoda where he basically says, "You've got time. I'll teach you how to do this." Okay? So again, he's not the first one in centuries. And even if he was, he could definitely show others because we see how many fucking others are Force ghosts. Just watch the damn films. Even in the original trilogy, at the end of Return of the Jedi, there's 3 freaking Force ghosts right there. Whether you watch the original theatrical cuts or you watch the special editions, it doesn't matter. You either see Sebastian Shaw or Hayden Christensen, you see Yoda, and you see Obi-Wan. And you literally see Obi-Wan as a Force ghost in Episode 5 twice, and in Episode 6 twice. So what the fuck are you even on about? You're so stupid. And in Episode 9, the very movie that you're yelling about having a plot hole literally has a Force ghost Luke Skywalker. Again, are you fucking dumb? It boggles my mind how idiotic some people can be about Star Wars. How they will ignore. I mean, like, at this point, like, 40 years of lore. 45 years of lore. Actually, I think it's 48 now, because Episode 7 came out in 1977. And this is 2025. They will ignore 48 years of lore to make stupid, wild-ass claims that have no basis in reality whatsoever. Because how do you know that Qui-Gon was the first one to turn into a Force ghost in centuries? Okay? Nowhere in any of the conversations that I've read and any of the things that happened did it say that Qui-Gon was the first one in centuries to do it. It was just that as Yoda was communing with the Force, he was hearing Qui-Gon Jinn. That's it. That's all it says. Okay? And we hear Qui-Gon's voice in Episode 2. And we are supposed to have a scene of Qui-Gon and Yoda talking in Episode 3. It's in the novelization. Again, not the main thing. But he does mention that he did climb back from the depths of the Force, and he's going to teach Obi-Wan how to commune with him, which is where we get that scene from Kenobi from. Okay? Because again, the showrunners and the movie makers and all of those people have actually studied the fucking lore. More so than this guy from What Culture ever has. And this is the problem I have with people like this. Is they want to stand there and claim that, oh, yeah, you know, these are plot holes. That's not a plot hole, son. Because it literally says Jedi ancient and recent. Meaning she's hearing people who died a long, long time ago, and she's hearing people that died recently, like Luke and Yoda and Obi-Wan. And she's like, wow, there's a lot of Jedi here. Because remember, okay, the whole crux of that thing is Luke tells her, you're going to Exegol, and you're going to represent all the Jedi. And you're going to be facing off against Palpatine, who is all the Sith. And all of our hopes as Jedi ride on you. Because it's the only way that you're going to bring balance back to the Force. Again, are you an idiot? Yes. The answer is yes. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, drop a comment below. Let me know what you think of this series so far. In the next one, we're going to jump right back into it, and we're going to hit it hard because I'm going to finish this crap. I'm done with this. I am absolutely effing done with this because these people are so freaking stupid. We're going to quash this once and for all. And we're going to show people that the sequel trilogy is not the hateful thing that everybody makes it out to be. It's actually really decent and right in line with all of the lore. So stay tuned for that. And as we say, we'll see you on the next one.